they can be patient and develop into something. But, unless you're the head coach's son, everyone on this roster came via the portal. And that's just the reality of colleges. You almost have to play freshmen. Like, you almost feel like, especially if you have a high recruited freshman that you want to keep in your program for 3 years, like, you're almost forced to kind of play that. And hopefully Janowski can get to the point where they feel like they can put him on the court next year. But there's a lot of guys on that roster. So we'll see. Hey, one more thing before a couple more things actually before we take a break here. Over the summer, as you noticed now this week, we're minimizing down to 3 episodes a week, and don't worry, we'll ramp back up as we get closer and closer to the middle and the end of July. But we wanted to remind people that if you have a local business, and if you listen to the show, or if you know somebody who has a local business and you want to tell people about it, you think it'd be a good fit, and you want to advertise with us, we'd love to have a conversation. The opportunity is there for you, so get in ahead of football season when we expect to blow this thing up a little bit. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Reach out to one of us or via the email at lockedonNEB@gmail.com. Mitch, did I cover everything in our short elevator pitch there? Yeah, we'll put your people in touch with our people, and things don't happen. Hey, one more reminder, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, you can turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. Free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels that are the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, back for a final segment on the Locked On Nebraska pod on a Wednesday. Mitch Sherman here. Connor Happer is with me. So, Connor, I fired up the YouTube last night, watched. I think I'm maybe more anxiously await these things than like the average person, but I really marvel at what Nebraska does with its video production and just the ability to put together its different documentaries. So shout out to them again for another interesting episode of the Chasing 3 doc that came out, debuted on Tuesday night. So as we've mentioned last week, when we talked about Rahmir Johnson and
oh damn, you got my ass.
He was featured in this episode along with Thomas Fidone, and it offered a very insightful look into what these two have endured to come back from the kind of injuries that they experienced. I thought Fidone especially was open about the struggles. Consider being a 2 tight end in the country within his class, and there was debate about whether Fidone or Bowers deserved to be the number 1 tight end in that class. And Bowers is now a first-round pick, and Fidone is coming into his own as a tight end after 2 ACL injuries. So that's just a huge for anyone to overcome, especially someone who had the expectations that he did coming into the program. And as we saw in this episode, the inner drive, and I think we knew that about Thomas already. It was cool to see them to a couple of people inside the Nebraska program about Johnson and Fidone who don't necessarily get all of the spotlight on them or any spotlight on them. One is Drew Hamblin, who has been with Nebraska for more than a decade as a trainer, and he's the director of football rehabilitation. And then Matt Hobbs, who's part of the strength staff, part of Corey Campbell's staff, his title is Return to Performance Coordinator. So those guys do a lot of the same thing on the medical side or on the strength side, and they offered a lot of insight into what Rahmir and Thomas have gone through and coming back to be pieces in this offense, I would say, that are Nebraska in 24. No doubt. I'm usually really, we're skeptical of this. Guys coming off of injuries, we're trying to fix them guys.
Let's go!
Haven't done it before to that high of a level.
Damn, that was crazy.
Jump, especially for how long both of those guys have been here. For Fidone in particular, like his outlook changes.
We gotta get swifty.